Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 81a, top of the page, with the words Shiyu, Marian, Bechor, Shin. The conditions are that people shall have the right to graze their animals in forests. Okay, we're talking about that there were 10 stipulations that Yehoshua had established when settling the land of Israel back in the day. And here we go. The conditions are that the people shall have the right to graze their animals in forests, even on private property, and that they shall have the right to gather wood from each other's fields to be used as animal fodder, and that they shall have the right to gather wild vegetation for animal fodder in any place except for a field of fenugreek, and that they shall have the right to pluck off a shoot anywhere for propagation and planting except for olive shoots, and that the people of the city shall have the right to take supplies of water from a spring on a private property, even from a spring that emerges for the first time, and that they shall have the right to fish in the Sea of Tiberias, that is, the Sea of Galilee, provided that the fisherman does not build an underwater fence to catch fish, thereby causing an impediment to boats. The Braita continues the list of Joshua's 10 conditions. And people shall have the right to relieve themselves outdoors behind a fence, even in a field that is full of saffron, karkum. And they shall have the right to walk in permitted paths, that is, those paths that cut through a private field throughout the summer until the second rainfall, when crops begin to sprout. And they shall have the right to veer off to the sides of the roads onto private property because of hard protrusions of the road, and when it becomes lost among the vineyards, shall have the right to cut down branches and enter an area of the vineyard, or cut down branches and exit an area of the vineyard until he finds his way back to the road. And that a corpse with no one to bury it requires its place and is buried where it was found. The first condition mentioned in the Braita is that people shall have the right to graze their animals in forests. Rav Papa said, "We said this only with regard to small domesticated animals, that is sheep or goats, that graze in forests or large trees. Small animals grazing in a forest of this kind would not destroy it. But in the case of small animals grazing in a forest with small growth, or large animals, for example oxen, grazing in a forest of large trees, these practices are not permitted. As in either of these scenarios, the practice would destroy the forest, and all the more so, it is understood that large animals grazing in a forest with small growth is not permitted." The Gemara discusses the next condition mentioned in the Braita, and that they shall have the right to gather wood from each other's fields to be used as animal fodder. The Gemara comments, "We said this only with regard to twigs of thorns and shrubs, as the field's owner does not care about these. But with regard to other types of wood, it is not permitted, and even with regard to twigs of thorns and shrubs, we said this only when they are attached to the ground. But when they have been detached by the owner, it is not permitted, as he has already claimed them for himself. And even when they are attached, we said this only when the twigs are still moist, But when they are completely dry, it is not permitted, as the owner requires these for firewood. Moreover, it is permitted only provided that one does not uproot the thorn bush or shrub from the ground, but it is prohibited to pull them out with their roots. The Gemara further discusses Joshua's conditions, and that they shall have the right to gather wild vegetation for animal fodder in any place except for a field of fenugreek. The Gemara asks, is this to say that wild vegetation is good for fenugreek, and therefore the owner wants it to be left in his fields? The Gemara raises a contradiction from a Mishnah that deals with diverse kinds. Climb 2.5. With regard to fenugreek that sprouted alongside various types of wild vegetation, one is not required to uproot the vegetation, although it is generally prohibited to grow different species of vegetables together in one patch if the species have a negative impact on each other's growth. It is not prohibited. In this case, the wild vegetation may be left alongside the fenugreek because it is harmful to it, and the halachot of diverse kinds do not apply in a case of this kind. Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Rabbi Jeremiah said, Rav Yirmiyah said, this is not difficult. Here the Mishnah is referring to a case where fenugreek was planted for its seeds. There the Braita lists Joshua's conditions referring to fenugreek planted for its stalks. When it is planted for its seeds, wild vegetation is bad for it, as it weakens the fenugreek and lowers its yield. But when it is planted for its stalks, wild vegetation is good for it, as when it is situated among vegetation it climbs on it, and thereby grows to a larger size. If you wish, say, instead another answer. Here the Mishnah is referring to a case where the fenugreek was planted for human consumption, and there the Braita is referring to fenugreek planted for animal consumption. Since the owner sowed the fenugreek for animal consumption, the wild vegetation is also required by him, as this too can be used for animal fodder. And how can we know if a particular fenugreek field was planted for human or animal consumption, and thereby know whether that the vegetation may be picked and taken? Rav Papa said if he planted it in rows, Mishareh, it is for human consumption. If he did not plant in rows, but planted haphazardly, it is for animal consumption. The Braita teaches, and that they shall have the right to pluck off a shoot anywhere for propagation or planting, except for olive shoots, as this would cause damage to the olive tree. Rabbi Tanchum and Rabbi Brias explained this in the name of a certain elder. With regard to olive trees, one must leave a shoot the size of an egg on the trunk when detaching it from the trunk. In the case of reeds and grapevines, he may take shoots only from the place of the first knot and above. And with regard to all other trees, shoots may be taken only from the thick part of the tree, where there are many branches growing, but not from the thin part of the tree. Furthermore, one may take from a new branch which does not yet produce fruit, but not from old branches which do produce fruits, and one may take from a place that does not face the sun,